Northwest 579, Minneapolis Center, good evening.
Minneapolis, Northwest 985.
Northwest 985, go ahead.
Just curious, we're just looking ahead at 12 o'clock. Are you working a formation flight of 2?
What altitude?
I guess ours maybe a little higher.
Negative?
Okay, I guess maybe it's bugs on the windscreen.
It's about the size of a small one-story house. It was silver in color. It was metal. It looked metal. It was shaped in a perfect triangle, and it had 2 bright-colored white lights.
It was circular in shape, and there was 2 circular white lights, big ones.
I just couldn't believe what it looked like, because it was so bright.
And then it separated it with a green light, and then there was 2 more great big white lights, and then it separated again with a red light.
And I took off as fast as I could go, and I wouldn't even look towards it. And I was just scared to death.
Scanned the area where we were standing, and then it went just above us, up to this ridge. The bright light that was in the center went out, and 3 red lights came on. Then those lights turned yellow, and it landed.
It had 2 red lights and 1 blue light. It was in a triangular type shape, and it took off at speed that you can't believe. We chased it, and it just vanished before we could even round another corner.
This thing followed us, and it ain't no jet, and it ain't no planet or star, okay?
I spent 20 years in service, 14 in the Air Force, and never seen anything move so fast in my life.
I had this funny feeling like static electricity around me or something. I don't know. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. I looked up behind the barn.
It was just this great, big, brilliant yellow light. Just a brilliant yellow, orange
A
light.
giant object like an upside-down cup was just there, hovering, not making a sound, but weird-looking light.
It stopped and hovered right over our car. We were on our way to town. I saw a triangular-shaped vehicle.
Well, I never used to believe in it, but I do now.
There are people who say they've seen more than distant blips of light in the sky. These people say they've seen, up close and in detail, flying vehicles that appear to be not of this earth. The implications of these claims are astonishing. Is Earth just one of many planets that supports technologically advanced intelligent life? If so, what does that say about our place in this universe? The modern era of UFOs, or unidentified flying objects, is generally acknowledged to have started with pilot Kenneth Arnold's strange sighting in June of 1947 while flying his private plane in Washington State near Mount Rainier. This radio interview was conducted just hours after the sighting.
I climbed back up to 9,200 feet, and I noticed to the left of me a chain which looked to me like the tail of a Chinese kite, kind of weaving and going at a terrific speed across the face of Mount Rainier. At first, thought they were geese because it flew like geese, but it was going so fast that I immediately changed my mind and decided it was a bunch of new jet planes in formation. They looked something like a pie plate that was cut in half with a sort of a convex triangle in the rear. They didn't fly in a conventional formation that's taught in our Army. They seemed to kind of weave in and out right above the mountaintops. I kept looking for their tails. They didn't have any tails. I thought, well, maybe something's wrong with my eyes on it. And the best calculation I could figure out, now even in spite of error, would be around 1,200 miles an hour.
Arnold seemed to think that he would have trouble convincing skeptics of his amazing story.
That is what I actually saw, and like I told the Associated Press, I'd be glad to confirm it with my hands on a Bible, because I did see it, and whether it has anything to do with our Army or our intelligence, or whether it has to do with some foreign country, I don't know. It's just as much a mystery to me as it is to everyone else who's been calling me the last 24 hours wondering what it was.
The objects that Arnold saw were never identified. Later in the same year, the infamous events at Roswell, New Mexico added an unforgettable chapter to the story of UFOs. Many claim that a spacecraft, piloted by extraterrestrials, crash-landed near Roswell. In fact, the Air Force released a statement announcing that a flying disc had been recovered. The Air Force later retracted the story, saying that a weather balloon, not an alien spacecraft, came down near Roswell. But many continue to believe the original story, that the United States government has in its possession the wreckage of an alien spacecraft as well as the bodies of extraterrestrials. From 1948 to 1969, the Air Force investigated UFO reports. In 1969, this Air Force program, by then known as Project Blue Book, was shut down. The Air Force claimed that UFOs weren't worth investigating. Others accused the Air Force, as well as the entire U.S. government, of perpetuating a massive UFO cover-up. The mystery of UFOs seized the public's consciousness and never let go. Strange flying machines, piloted by otherworldly visitors, became a staple concept in our culture and media.
Apart from Earth, is there life in the universe? Nobody really knows. But it is possible that in the space beyond us, there is life, that there are other suns giving warmth and life to worlds like ours.
The United States of America. I set her down like a feather.
Despite popular culture's enthusiastic acceptance of UFOs as symbols of extraterrestrial intelligence, only a minority of the general public seem to feel that way. A Baylor University survey found that 26% of participants agree or strongly agree with the statement, "Some UFOs are probably spaceships from other worlds." So, are UFOs simply colorful fodder for comic books and science fiction movies, or do UFOs represent something much more profound? In 1999, a group of high-ranking French officials released the Cometa Report. Journalist and author Leslie Kean comments.
And these were a group of very high-level French military people that had done a 3-year study on UFOs, including there were 4 generals involved, a 4-star general, an admiral, the head of the National Space Study Center in France, which is the equivalent of our NASA, former head. They were mainly retired people, scientists, a government official that had, studied the issue for decades as part of the French government agency. So it was a very impressive group of people that spent, as I said, 3 years studying official data on the UFO issue because they were concerned about the national security implications of it. There are a lot of cases of pilots, for instance, encountering these things. The thing that really got me as a journalist was their conclusion. They stated in the report that they thought the extraterrestrial hypothesis was the most valid, rational, and likely explanation for these cases that they studied, for which there was really no explanation that they could come up with because of the technology that was displayed by these objects, these physical objects. So, I realized as a journalist, when you have like a group of generals saying that, we have this data that's very likely an extraterrestrial object, it's kind of like, I thought, wow, this is really big news.
The Cometa Group determined that although about 95% of UFO sightings can be explained by conventional means, there remains 5% that represent cases in which credible witnesses report objects that defy any sort of earthly explanation. In many cases, pilots and other trained observers say they saw flying objects perform maneuvers that no earthly craft could. The report makes the bold conclusion that the 5% represent completely unknown flying machines with exceptional performances that are guided by a natural or artificial intelligence.
So what we're talking about is this 5% that they reference, which are the cases that have been so thoroughly investigated that any other explanation can be eliminated just because they have so much data for the case that they know it can't be this, it can't be that, and it can't be this. And there aren't that many cases like that, but there are enough to really raise a serious question, and also to show exactly what those generals stated, which is that there are physical objects that demonstrate these qualities and these capacities that are beyond the capabilities of human beings, and these things actually exist, and they're physical.
Kean understands that many UFO sightings are reported by witnesses who are difficult to doubt.
There are many, many credible witnesses who come from the high levels within the militaries and governments of many countries. There are pilots who are highly trained to recognize all kinds of, flying phenomena that they have to be prepared to deal with when they're up in the skies. I don't think people realize that, there are people of this caliber that report these events and that study them and that are aware of the reality of them.
One such credible case occurred at 37,000 feet over Lake Michigan in July of 1981. During a clear, sunny afternoon, Captain Phil Schultz was flying a TWA L-1011 from San Francisco to JFK Airport. While the plane was cruising on autopilot, a large, round, silver, shiny metallic object suddenly appeared in front and to the left of the jet. Both Captain Schultz and his first officer braced for impact. But the impact never occurred, as the UFO executed an incredible high-speed turn. Dr. Richard F. Haynes, a former NASA research scientist and unidentified aerial phenomena researcher, calculates that the UFO was traveling at about 1,000 miles per hour and performed a 20G turn. Captain Schultz estimates that the object was as big as a baseball stadium. Based on Dr. Haynes' research, this animated recreation shows what Captain Schultz saw from his cockpit vantage point. The entire incident took about 5 to 6 seconds. Schultz had difficulty describing the sudden appearance of the object. Finally, he used a paper napkin to demonstrate, saying that the object appeared in the sky as if it had punched through the atmosphere, like a finger punching through a napkin. He says that he saw tears in the atmosphere that were like the thin white lines of a spider's web. Captain Schultz, a Korean War jet combat veteran, had never believed that UFOs were unusual flying vehicles, but this event instantly changed his mind. Schultz later said to Dr. Haynes, "There is no doubt in my mind. It was an extraterrestrial craft." In 1982, on a clear day over Portugal, Portuguese Air Force officer pilot Julio Guerra saw something he would never forget. While flying solo in his DHC-1 Chipmunk at about 5,000 feet, Lieutenant Guerra noticed another craft below and to his left, near the ground. He soon realized that this aircraft had no wings or tail, only a cockpit. Lieutenant Guerra turned his craft around to investigate the strange object. Suddenly, the object ascended, coming to a hovering standstill in front of the Chipmunk. Then, at great speed, the object began a series of large elliptical orbits around Guerra's craft. A few minutes later, 2 fellow officers arrived in their own Chipmunk to witness the amazing encounter. With another aircraft for reference, Lieutenant Guerra was able to estimate the diameter of the object at about 8 to 10 feet. Determined to get a closer look at the craft, Guerra plotted an intercept course with the object. He flew almost directly into the trajectory of its orbital path. The object zoomed to his plane and hovered a mere 15 feet directly over it. Lieutenant Guerra reports that he simply froze at this moment, expecting impact. But there was no impact. With an astonishing burst of speed, the object flew away. Investigators could not identify the object, and it remains unidentified to this day. One perplexing case from the Project Blue Book files took place in Albuquerque, New Mexico on an August evening in 1951. Hugh Young, a security guard, and his wife Emily reported seeing a large flying wing craft that glided over their home as Mr. Young was waiting for his ride to work. The Youngs immediately reported the unusual sighting to Kirtland Air Force Base. Mr. Young estimated that the craft flew 300 miles per hour at an altitude of 800 to 1,000 feet. There was no visible means of propulsion. Wingspan was estimated to be about 345 feet. That's longer than a football field. Young reported that the most outstanding feature of this large craft is that it moved through the air without making any sound at all. The craft was in view for about 30 seconds until it flew out of sight. Project Blue Book investigators made no conclusions about this case. A strange encounter in the skies over the North Atlantic Ocean was reported in the April 1978 bulletin of the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. A captain of a TWA jet reports that he and his co-pilot saw a mass of twinkling lights that appeared on the starboard side of their plane. At one point, the pilot feared his jet would collide with the shining object, but at the last second, the object performed an incredible right-angle turn to avoid collision. The craft positioned itself ahead and to the right of the jet. The pilot and co-pilot estimate that the object was about 100 feet across. The pilot said that it reminded him of an Oreo cookie. After pacing the jet for about 20 minutes, lights around the object began to go out in clusters. Once their eyes became accustomed to the light, they spied trapezoid shapes around the object that could have been windows. The object took on a bluish corona, then accelerated to an unbelievable speed, leaving only a blue streak. The pilot who reported this incident said that he reported it anonymously because of harassment he suffered after reporting a previous UFO encounter. Chalk Bluff Park in Texas was the scene of a strange UFO sighting in 1994. San Antonio resident Michael Salas was visiting the park with friends when they saw something very unusual.
Friends and I are out there. We walked down another road to the river. Kind of does a meandering thing, so we went down this other road, and the river is really low. Cars can cross the river there, so we walked down, and we're just looking at the stars and listening to the sound of the water because the water's shallow but moving swiftly. And I lied down because I was tired of looking up, and there was a triangular cone with light streaming around. And so, like, this is the cliff, and here's the light, and it's like here, the lights are going around, and it shoots a beam of light down, and then it goes here, shoots a beam of light, and zoom, and boom. And it was doing it like a grid. You know, we could see it going back, and then doom, doom, doom. We watched it for half an hour. There was 5 of us out that night. And 2 of them refused to discuss it. The other remembers seeing it all. And we watched it for a good half hour.
The object seen by Michael and his friends displays behavior that other UFO witnesses claim to have seen in other UFOs. For instance, it was silent, employed unusual lighting, and disappeared in an instant.
What happened is we started walking down this road to see if we could get a closer look. We were in pitch dark, but the roads, I mean, it's all limestone, so if there's moonlight out, the roads kind of glow, so you know where you're going. Well, there was a metal gate, and a friend touched the gate when they were climbing it, and it clamped, and that light went gone. The cone-shaped object just took off.
Michael and his friends never saw the object again. In 1980, one of the most well-documented UFO encounters ever occurred in Rendlesham Forest near the RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge complex in England, an installation operated by both the United States and English military. Sergeant James Penniston of the U.S. Air Force was the senior security officer in charge of Woodbridge base security. In the early morning hours of December 26th, Penniston was ordered to investigate lights seen in nearby Rendlesham Forest. Penniston approached the light with his 2 teammates. For the first time ever in this report, Penniston worked closely with an animation artist to accurately visualize what he saw in the Rendlesham woods that night.
Here's exactly what I was thinking. I'm going out there with, my mindset was like this. I'm going to go out and set up an entry control point for a downed aircraft, a crashed. We're going to go ahead and tag classified material and body parts. That's what I'm thinking. And then we're going to set up the entry control point so we can get emergency response vehicles out there. When I got up to the area where I seen it wasn't an aircraft crash, and it was something that I couldn't identify, I was perplexed, not understanding what I was seeing. I I hadn't been trained for anything even close to that, you know. So here's the gear adjustments were switching, were just crazy. I went from crash and recovery thoughts to I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what is in front of me. I'm confused. And this is not a comfortable situation for a security supervisor. You're confused, you're not sure what you're doing, not sure what to do. And that's the feeling I was getting. Of course, I am talking back and forth with my teammates, and we're coming back with the same type of confusion. We're not sure what's going on in front of us.
The bright light Penniston and his team initially encountered dissipated, revealing an unbelievable object.
The craft was a triangular craft. It was black in color, very shiny. It was metal, but it was smooth as glass. Inside the fabric of this triangular craft, there was light movement of red and blue running through the fabric of it. I had pasted off, and it measured 9 feet by 9 feet by 9 feet. It was approximately, based on my height, I'm 6'2", so I estimated it at 7 feet tall. It was very small for aircraft. It had one of the things that I was looking at initially was I was looking for obvious things that aircraft have, looking for landing gear, looking for intake, looking for exhaust, looking for crew compartment, looking for windows. It was void of all those. That's where the confusion comes in at. I came back around to the right side of it. When I seen those glyphs, I seen that there's some writing up there, so I felt pretty comfortable at that moment, because I said, okay, it's going to say United States Air Force, prototype, something like that. It's going to say NASA on it. And then, of course, you know, I seen something that I hadn't seen before.
The glyphs that Penniston mentions are symbols that were etched into the side of the craft. Penniston sketched these symbols in a notebook, but their meaning is a mystery. As Penniston and his team approached the craft, they began feeling unusual sensations.
The immediate area around the craft, we noticed physical changes. We noticed that the sound was different. For example, the lack of sound around it was like a deadening sound. We were hearing animals before we got within like 10 feet. And then once we got within this area right around the craft, it went silent. Then we started feeling static electricity on our skin and on our hair and our clothes. One of the unusual effects is that once we entered this immediate area around the craft, it felt like everything went in slow motion. It felt like there was a dragging of time. We did have, discrepancies on our watches after we left the area of 45 minutes. And what appeared to be us just examining the craft for 5 or 10 minutes actually was over a couple hours out there. So we did lose track of some time. We do know that we did have adrenaline going. We do understand that that can affect the way things are perceived. But it was just too much, 2 hours is a long time to write off for adrenaline.
Penniston knew that he had to be careful when reporting this incident.
In my report, the term craft of unknown origin, I was not going to in any way, shape, or form use the term UFO in there. I used a military term. I couldn't determine the origin, and I let somebody else figure that out. I figured, okay, my job is to gather the facts, which I did. I'll if it's above my pay grade, let somebody else figure out what it was. And so that's pretty much how I was looking at it. Also, we had a very real fear of our careers, because we know that this is something that would hurt our careers reporting this type of phenomenon. It just wasn't done.
Penniston does have a theory as to why the craft was there that night.
A feeling I had why that night, and in retrospect, looking back at it, the feeling I had is that it was in trouble. It wasn't supposed to be there. And the other odd thing is that why would it land? Why would it be on the ground that long? Why would it allow it to be examined unless it had to, unless it was repairing itself? And that's a feeling I had then, and I still have with it today. What kind of technology repairs itself?
During his encounter, Penniston describes experiencing confusion, fear, astonishment, and awe. If extraterrestrial intelligence were to reveal itself to human beings, would humanity experience the same emotions?
I think I agree with the human race would probably experience the same type of feelings I had. But I think one of the things that I hadn't mentioned is probably denial. Is one of also the feelings you feel. Well, this can't be what I think it could be. I think that's part of what's going on there. And because we're rational people, we want rational answers, especially in that position I was in. I mean, what we had on that base, in those twin bases, largest tactical fighter wing in the United States Air Force.
Penniston has written that the feelings he had during this encounter were unlike any he had ever had before. He describes an unexpected additional emotional state that he experienced.
It felt sort of complete. It felt like it was okay. And then when it took off, there was an absence of that feeling.
After about 45 minutes, the colors on the craft became more agitated as they once again became an intense white color.
And then it started getting even brighter and brighter, and now we're squinting, and all I could see is a white light. But it was still not as bad as when we first came up to the craft, because this still could take off and go up to about treetop level, and then and I could still see the silhouette of the triangular craft. But when I initially approached it, it was just too bright.
Despite his own extraordinary experience, Penniston maintains a skepticism about the subject of UFOs.
Didn't believe in that phenomenon before, and I don't believe in it now. I know. It's lights in the sky, don't even talk to me about it. I said, because there's 99% chance it's explainable.
Reports of UFOs in an astonishing number of shapes and sizes come from all over the world. Are these reports believable? Author Leslie Kean answers the question, do you believe in UFOs?
It is actually a fact that these things exist. So it's not a question of whether you believe in them or not. The fact is that the phenomenon exists and is well documented many times over. The question of belief comes in as to what we think they actually might be. So I think that part of the problem is that the word UFO is misunderstood. The word UFO stands for unidentified flying object, which really is just something that's in the sky that we can't explain. So the reality is UFOs exist. So the question, do you believe in UFOs, isn't really the appropriate question. The question people really want to know is, do you believe that they're alien spacecraft?
Maybe one day, perhaps soon, the intelligence behind these astonishing vehicles will reveal itself. In the meantime, look up, be patient, and keep a camera handy.